Chapter 1. I am the only surviving member of 1st Battalion, 518th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, Army of the United States. My unit was decimated in the Ardennes forest during the winter of 1944 to 1945 by enemies both human and otherwise. This account has been a long time coming. I don't really know how to explain that. Part of it is the nature of the beast. My generation is particularly reluctant to dwell on what we've done, or especially how we felt about doing it. We had a job to do, and we did it. Over and done with. Maybe it's just the way we were brought up. Maybe it's just me. It's dangerous for one man to speak for a generation. Part of my delay has to do with the nature of what happened in those snow-covered woods all those years ago. War is surreal by nature. It's hard enough to try to describe what it was like to begin with, much less talk about the things we found and saw and fought in Domcairn, without sounding insane or senile or both. Maybe you won't believe me. Hell, there's already guys who say the Holocaust never happened, and I saw that too. Part of it is the nightmares, in which dark shapes huddling just out of sight in the mists murmur warbling commands in a language no human has ever spoken. I don't understand the words per se, but the meaning is clear. Keep your mouth shut. I guess the reason I'm writing this at all is my fading memory. My memory has become my blessing and my curse. It's getting so that I can't always remember what it is I did today or the day before, or even what I was in the middle of doing. Those days, though, those days I can remember almost photographically. Every day from when I signed up for the Army all the way through jump school and the drops on Normandy and Holland and then the Bulge and all the rest, until we ended the war up at the Eagle's Nest, Hitler's mountain refuge in Austria. Remembering those days at Domcairn is a curse. It will be a blessing when this Alzheimer's, or whatever it is that's eating my memories, gets around to lunching on January 1945. For those of you that don't know history, it was a tail end of the Battle of the Bulge, the biggest battle ever fought by the U.S. Army. It involved over 1 million men stretched along a front hundreds of miles long. Hitler made a last gasp offensive for Antwerp with an army that was already considered defeated. It was a doomed, damn fool gamble, and a lot of men got killed for it. But then, old Adolf had a knack for getting people killed, didn't he? Sometimes it's dangerous for one man to speak for a country. After we held off at Bastogne, the 101st was immediately ordered to assist in pushing the Germans back. There would be no rest for the airborne. In early January, we were holed up in the woods near a tiny village to the west of Noville. I never did find out its name. It was frigid cold and dirty and terrifying, mostly terrifying because we were waiting for a German counterattack. They always counterattacked. The war got truly terrifying after the attack came. It started with an artillery barrage. Chapter 2. His screams could be heard even over the explosions, which shook our spines and rattled our teeth and showered us with dirt and snow and spent fragments of shrapnel. "They're killing us! They're killing everybody! Jesus Christ, we didn't have a chance! They ran right over us and they didn't stop!" And "Settle down," I shouted, shaking him a little bit. It was bad enough with the artillery falling all around us. This guy's panic was like throwing lit matches at a puddle of gasoline. Already his screaming was starting to have an effect on the men in the foxholes around us. One to the left front of my hole started shouting at the top of his lungs, "Fuck you! Fuck you! Leave me alone, you bastards! I'll kill every fucking one of you and get my hands on you, you son of a bitch!" I'm sure the mother of Artie Gorman, the guy shouting in the hole, would cringe at his language or the desperate harshness in his voice as he hurled it up at the shells coming down around us. But you have to understand the situation. An artillery barrage is like nothing else on Earth. The best way I can describe it is like this. Imagine yourself lying in bed at the end of an exhausting day. I mean, you're bone-weary, dead dog-tired. You lie down and close your eyes, and your body seems to sink into the mattress as you dip your toes into the waters of sleepiness to test them. And then, as you're about to drift off, somebody creeps in, kneels down, puts their face a few inches from your ear, takes a deep breath in, and screams as loudly as they can directly into your ear. What happens? You jump out of your skin is what happens. Electric bolts shoot from your spine out to the tips of your fingers and toes. Your heart feels like somebody stuck an ice pick into it. Your lungs get stuck momentarily, like they forgot whether they were in the middle of an inhale or an exhale. And you get pissed. Oh, God, do you get pissed. Dogs barking, car horns blaring, any kind of loud noise gets us pissed when we're tired as hell. So, take that sensation and try to amplify it, because the shells are a hell of a lot louder than a shout. On every single one, you get that spine-jarring sensation. But now add in the fear of knowing that it's not just a loud noise, that each explosion is also accompanied by a hailstorm of red-hot, razor-sharp metal shards whistling through the air as fast as a bullet. And you're not just tired, you're exhausted, because you've spent all day marching and then the rest digging a hole in the frozen ground that you wish you dug even deeper once the 88 starts sending over some mail. That, and you didn't get any sleep the night before, for this very same reason. You can't fight back. You can't get up out of that bed and punch the guy that screamed in your ear. You can't get your asshole neighbor to shut his dog up or turn his incessantly blaring car horn off. All you can do is sit and take it. For hours. It sometimes lasts for hours. And guys snap. You can't help it. You scream or cry or pray or do whatever you have to do to release that wildfire of panic. So don't blame Artie too much for his mouth. I've been there myself. I gave the trooper who was screaming in my hole a little slap across the face to settle him. I couldn't have him setting off all my men like Artie. I call panic a wildfire because it can spread from man to man just like a wildfire. Instead of snapping out of it, he just snapped. Looking at me with wild eyes, he shouted, "Fuck you guys! They're coming here next! They killed everybody at HQ and we're next! I'm not dying here with you, you bastards!" He made a move to jump out of the hole. That's suicide. Only madmen, medics, and runners get out of their holes when there's Artie coming in, especially as intense as that night. I cold-cocked him with my helmet and he dropped like a stone into the hole. He'd be okay. By the time he woke up, the shelling would be over and we could get him to an aid station. And for now, I wouldn't have to listen to his screaming. A shell hit overhead in the top of a nearby pine tree, showering shrapnel down like the blast from a shotgun. I could hear pieces of metal thud into the tree trunk 2 feet from my hole. I cursed the bad luck or oversight or both that got my battalion stuck in the woods. It's the worst place to get shelled. Treetop explosions throw death into foxholes like nobody's business. A quick peek over the top of my hole to get my bearings in the dark, and I psyched myself up for the run. Madmen, medics, and runners get out of their holes during an artillery barrage, and you can add first sergeants to that list. I had to get to the company. I had to get to the captain, our company commander. Right after the next shell hit, I launched myself out of the hole and tore ass through the trees, towards where I knew Captain Powell had his foxhole. There was a whistling shriek, and my balls pulled up into my stomach because long experience of listening to those shells told me it was going to be close. Only one thing to do. I hugged the nearest tree trunk. The theory is the shell hits the treetop and blows shrapnel down and out in a cone, so there's a blind spot of sorts right at the bottom of the tree. In theory. Except this time, I heard branches snap above me, sending down a cascade of snow shaking loose from the boughs, and then I saw the shell. I really saw it in the dead of night in a snow-covered wood, come down right in front of me. There was no light flashing before my eyes for me. I just shorted out, popped like a burnt-out light bulb, and then when I blinked, I knew I wasn't dead after all. It was a dud. It stuck out of the ground 3 feet in front of the tree, a dark shape thrust into the middle of the whiteness. Steam rose with a hiss around its edges from its heat melting the snow. Thoughts came in a flurried haze. Holy shit, did that just happen? Someone up there loves me. Move, shithead, the next one won't be a dud. I pried my arms from around the tree and practically leapt the next 10 yards to the next foxhole. There were 2 troopers in it already, but I squeezed my way in somehow. Holy shit, Sarge, one of them said breathlessly. His name was Pelosi, and he joined the company right before Bastogne. Did you see that dud hit right in front of you? You'd have been... Can it, Private, I barked at him. The last thing I wanted to dwell on was how close I'd come to getting blown into hamburger. And then, like a reprieve or a gift from God, it stopped. Well, not stopped, not entirely. There were still shells hitting our front lines about 150 yards away, but it wasn't anywhere near what we'd been getting. Hey, is it over? Pelosi asked, squirming underneath me to try and get a look out of his hole. Stay in your hole, I said to the both of them. They'll sometimes give us a little pause, let us think it's over, and then once we get up and out to take care of the wounded, whammo, they hit us again. I didn't want to get out. The closeness of our bodies drove a little of the frigid cold out of me. Right, Sarge. Hey, where are you going? Gotta get to the captain, I said, and ran like hell. The shelling at our front lines petered out to nothing, and then I could hear it again, the sound of tank cannons and machine guns firing back in the direction of our battalion HQ. They were really catching hell. It sounded like every crowd in the woods had one of those smasher submachine guns we called burp guns. The company's CP was in a clearing. The captain knew what he was doing, so he picked a spot where the tree-burst shells couldn't rain sharp metal down on him. His hole was about 30 yards from the edge of the trees, and I think I covered the distance in all of 2 seconds. Again, it was like trying to shove 5 pounds of dirt into a 3-pound bag. The captain was used to visitors, and so his hole was larger than normal, but there was a radio operator in there with him, and the three of us were like wool-wrapped sardines until we figured out whose limb was whose. Sergeant Kinder, the captain said in greeting as we jostled for position. Did you find him? Him being the screaming trooper lying unconscious in the hole I'd left. A medic had come into the company CP yelling about a raving soldier from battalion HQ, and the captain had sent me back to find out what was what. Sergeant? Yeah, I said, finally getting into some semblance of a comfortable position. I found him. Where is he? Knocked out in the bottom of a foxhole, I said, and after catching a look from him, shrugged and added, He went nuts and tried to run out of the hole. I had to. Captain Powell seemed to consider that. Where's the medic? Christensen. Already round got him. Oh. Did you find out anything? Telephone lines battalion are out and they're still not responding to radio. The only people I can get a hold of is Baker Company next to us. Now that the ringing in my ears had subsided, I could pick up the sounds of battle from the area of Battalion HQ more clearly. Sounds like Battalion's been overrun big time, I said. From the reaction of that trooper and the amount of automatic weapons fire coming from that direction, I'd say they're getting hit by something pretty disagreeable. Captain Powell frowned and mulled things over for a moment. Contact patrol? I asked. And have them get wiped out by whatever's back there? Captain Powell said, shaking his head. No. If we go in force. He kept looking back and forth from our front lines, back in the direction of Battalion HQ, and back to the front lines again. I knew what he was thinking. Do we abandon our prepared defensive positions to help HQ, and maybe get hit in the rear by a German attack on our front? Or stay put, and maybe get cut off from the rest of the battalion, or even the entire regiment? Very well, he said at last. He used the words very well the way most people say, okay. We go. Assemble 3rd platoon and get me 2 runners to send for 1st and 2nd platoons. I already sent Harvey to contact 1st platoon, I said with a knowing grin. Captain Powell returned it. We'd been together long enough to finish each other's sentences, much less anticipate each other's actions. You'll still need 1 more. Runner! I shouted. As the runner reported in, along with a few men from 3rd platoon and a pair from 1st platoon, the radio operator announced one of the phone lines was actually working. I've got 3rd platoon, sir. Diaphragm on the receiver was frozen, but I got it thawed by breathing hard on it. His words reminded me again how bitter cold it was. With all of the excitement, I'd forgotten that I felt like a soldier's sickle. Within a few minutes, a trickle of GIs had collected around the CP. This is all, Captain Powell said. Where are the rest? Bunch of 3rd platoon's guys are spread out on the line to close up gaps, and 1st platoon is taking their damn time getting back here, I answered. Airborne rifle companies are made up of 3 rifle platoons, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, of about 40 men each, and a headquarters section of about another 15 or 20 men. Spread out amongst each platoon were our 60mm mortars, short-range artillery, our bazookas, and our 30 cal light and mobile machine guns. However, we weren't anywhere near full strength. It was hard to think of a time when we ever were. So we'd taken a few machine gun crews from 3rd platoon and sprinkled them on the line with the other platoons to close gaps. What it boiled down to was we had about 18 men rallied at the CP for the spearhead for our counterattack. But then, airborne policy has always been to replace firepower with crazy people, and you have to be crazy in order to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. Captain Powell fidgeted visibly. We don't have time to wait. We'll have the rest of 3rd platoon follow us up as they come in, then 1st platoon on our left flank, and 2nd in reserve. Clear? Men shrugged out of their heavy overcoats, those that had them, that is, and worked the actions on their weapons. As soon as Captain Powell saw we were ready, he nodded. Let's go. Chapter 3. The firing had almost completely stopped, but we ran like hell all the same. We might still save some wounded, or prevent some of our boys from being taken prisoner. The trees in that area of the Ardennes are close rows of pines, so close together that it's like a jungle canopy. You can't see more than 10 feet in any direction, and that's during the daytime. It's easy to get lost, and easy to get separated, so we stuck close together as we ducked under branches and fought through the snow. We made great time, although if you would have seen us, you would have called it crawling. We had to watch our step. If you bumped a pine bough and dumped the snow off it, you just told every German machine gunner around exactly where you are. So considering the handicap, we made it back to battalion in no time. Battalion HQ, of course, wasn't dug in amongst the dense trees. Major Carey, 1st Battalion Commander, was billeted in a farmhouse along a tiny road that wound along the edge of our stretch of woods. There were still trees here and there, of course, but the line of pine trees ended 50 yards shy of the farmhouse. Captain Powell called us to a halt at the edge of the woods. I could hear voices barking orders in German and the noisy, oily clanking of engines. Panzers. A glance showed me Shorty Malone was within arm's length with his bazooka, and that made me feel a bit better. HQ was history. The farmhouse and one of its outbuildings were burning, along with a haystack in the field nearby. The roaring of the flames made it seem as if the farmhouse was groaning out its last breath as it was eaten alive. The fires burned high in seeming defiance of the fat snowflakes tumbling down out of the sky and turned the area into a frozen level of hell. Bodies were scattered about like debris tossed by a severe thunderstorm. Panzers were lined along the road. There were a lot of them. I counted 8 stretching from left to right before the darkness beat out the firelight and hid the rest in the gloom. They were leaving. Tracks from their treads were all around the area, but now they were lined up neatly on the road and preparing to move out, to our right, into the dark. Infantry swarmed around them like worker ants. Most of them scrambled up onto the tanks for a free ride. Others herded prisoners into a group in front of the half-track, bringing up the rear of the armored column. They were SS. No doubt about it. Even 50 yards away in the dark, I could read their uniforms and the insignia on their vehicles like a billboard. "We keep them from taking the prisoners," Captain Powell whispered quickly. "Set the 2 machine guns up there and there. They cover our assault. Sergeant Kinder, take half our men. I will attack straight on with the other half. You hit the left flank, the end of the column, with yours. Sweep them away from the prisoners. Questions?" My hands were sweating despite the cold. They slid around inside my gloves as I wrung my hands around my carbine. The armored column started to move out just as we got our machine guns into position. The half-track, being last in line, wouldn't be moving for a minute or two, and the dozen or so infantry assigned to it lined the prisoners, maybe 20 or 30 of our guys, next to the road in a neat 2-row column to be marched out. I could recognize our medical personnel and some of our walking wounded. Right in front was Bill Smith, who had taken shrapnel in his leg the day before and refused to be evacuated. He didn't want to leave his buddies. I had to drag him bodily from the lines to the aid station, and even then, I only managed that by promising him he didn't have to leave battalion if the doctors at the aid station gave him the okay to stay. Behind and to the left of him was Ryan Fillmore, a platoon sergeant from Baker Company. He'd gotten himself a nasty case of trench foot and severe diarrhea to boot. There were a lot of guys on the line with those problems. They only came back to the aid station when it got so bad they couldn't function at all anymore. Some of them waited so long they lost toes or even feet. The SS had wiped out our HQ personnel and taken over our aid station as well. The guys were visibly shaken. They moved like drugged men or men just woken up. I can't say I blamed them. With 8 or more panzers and God knows how many troops attacking from out of nowhere in the middle of the night, I was amazed there were any survivors. We instinctively split into our 2 groups, and just as the captain was about to give the order, it happened. The SS troops cleared away from the prisoners. One shot through the air with his arm, and a jet of flame erupted from the trailing half-track. It looked like they were dousing the men with a hose, but instead of water passing over them in a stream that went left to right and back again, it was liquid fire that clung to them like thick molasses. The screams started immediately as men threw themselves into the snow in a futile effort to put out the fire that was eating them to the bone. We were all stunned into shocked silence. The SS laughed at their victims, and how they danced and screamed and flailed their arms about. They let it go on for a few moments before raking the group with machine gun fire. One of the burning prisoners charged the half-track, unarmed, and an SS officer sidestepped and tripped him easily. It was Bill Smith, charging the enemy even though he was burning alive and wounded so badly in the leg he could barely limp. But then, Bill always had been a tough son of a bitch. I'd known him since Normandy. Once he fell, the officer put a boot in his back, forcing him into the snow as he writhed and burned, and finally shot him in the back of the head with a pistol. He chatted idly with the soldier next to him the entire time, trading an occasional laugh. I lost it then. I don't know how to explain it any other way. They called me a hero for what I did next, but I really just lost it. Fell into a haze of rage and vengeance. "Son of a bitch!" I shouted. I wrestled the bazooka away from Shorty and ducked under the last of the pine boughs into the clearing. The prisoners were still burning, still dancing out their deaths, and the sight of the flames engulfing them began to engulf me in a fire of its own. My body began to burn, with a desire for murder and blood and savagery, and I lost myself to it. I charged them across the field, straight towards the half-track and the dozen or so troops surrounding it. The frigid air burned the inside of my lungs with bitter frost, but still I screamed a madman's war cry at them all the way. They spotted me once I'd made it about halfway. The officer took a shot at me with his pistol, and that seemed to be the signal for the fight to begin. Our 2 machine guns opened up from the woods, chattering a stream of lead and tracer bullets into the SS troops. The rest of the men surged forward out of the trees, shouting and firing as they came, but I was oblivious to all of it. All I saw was that damned half-track, and once the officer took his shot, I knelt, took a half-second to aim, and fired the bazooka. The rocket sailed straight to its mark. There was a small explosion as a rocket punched through the skin of the half-track, and then a much bigger one as something inside the half-track ignited. A brilliant fireball sailed up into the air, lighting the battlefield like daytime for a brief moment. That moment was lost on me. Dropping the bazooka, I unslung my carbine and resumed my charge, firing as I went, at the pair of SS troops near the rear of the half-track. They were dazed by the explosion, and I put 3 rounds into one infantryman's chest before the SS officer shook out of his daze and scrambled around the half-track for cover. Before he passed out of his sight, one of my shots punched a hole in his leg. My weapon either ran dry or jammed. It didn't matter, though. A stray round from an SS rifle caught it in the barrel and spun it out of my hands as if it had been kicked. Like a madman, like a man possessed, I dug the .45 pistol out of my flap holster and ran right up to the half-track. "Burn, you bastard!" I screamed at it, spittle flying from my mouth like a rabid dog. "You want to burn? Fucking burn!" Up the side of the burning half-track I climbed, in sheer defiance of logic. I had hit the ammo supply on the half-track, which had caused the explosion, and set it alight, but there were still the fuel tanks waiting to blow and incinerate anything in the area. But I was lost to the battle, and nothing I did made sense. 2 SS troopers were trying to pull a badly wounded comrade from the wreckage, and once I was on top of the half-track and could see them, I emptied my pistol into their faces. There were other SS around the half-track, but by now, the other GIs had almost caught up with me, so the SS were too busy with them to worry about one crazy sergeant with an empty pistol. The officer I'd shot, the executioner, was hobbling towards the next vehicle in line, a Panther tank, barely visible in the firelight. I threw my pistol at him, and then a trickle of sanity crept into me, and I repeated the performance with a grenade from my belt. The sharp crumple of an explosion went off next to him, throwing snow and metal fragments across his body. He hit the ground hard. Bullets began to snap the air around me and ping off the metal skin of the burning half-track I'd mounted. The SS troops further up the column were firing on us, especially on me, in an attempt to protect the rear of their column. Snarling like a wounded animal, I whipped the barrel of the half-track's mounted machine gun, the same machine gun that had just been used to murder our men, around and cut loose at them, aiming at any muzzle flashes I saw flaring in the dark. People were shouting at me from the ground, telling me to get off the burning vehicle before it exploded, but all I knew was the rapid brrrr of the machine gun as it rattled under my arm, and the muzzle flashes that I raked incessantly. The Panther tank was pulling away quickly now, the SS troops along with it, and I was determined to either burn out the machine gun's ammunition or its barrel before they left. Someone pulled at my jacket, shouting in my ear, but I shrugged him off and kept firing. In the dim half-light outside the radius of the fire's illumination, I could see the Panther tank's cannon swiveling around towards me. "Come and get me," I thought, spraying machine gun fire over the tank. "Show me what you've got, you son of a bitch." Finally, strong hands yanked me away from the machine gun and hurled me bodily to the ground. The Panther tank fired its cannon an instant later, blasting the top of the half-track into a mass of twisted metal. I struggled to my feet, pushing off my savior, and ran after them. "No, don't you run!" I screamed. "Don't you run away from me, you fucking cowards! I'm not done with you yet!" The Panther tank was swallowed up by the dark, but I threw a grenade anyway, more to throw something at them than to do real damage. I had no weapon, but I didn't want it to be over. I wasn't satisfied. I wanted to burn like the farmhouse, consume myself in an orgy of killing until I fell to pieces from sheer exhaustion. And there was the officer, the executioner, the one with a bullet in his leg and grenade fragments through his body. He was still alive, barely, trying to drag himself in the direction of the already disappeared armored column. I was on him in a second, scooping up an entrenching tool, a short shovel, that was sticking out of the earth nearby. It made a good makeshift axe, and he wasn't wearing a helmet. My memory is kind of fuzzy on the next couple of seconds. All I really remember is the feel of the wooden handle gripped tight in my fist, and the feeling you get in your hand when you've hit too many balls during batting practice. The sound of metal splitting bone, and the soft tearing sound as a blade wrenched free again and again. Once more, somebody tried to stop me, shouting, "Sarge! Sarge!" in my ear, and then finally he grabbed my arm and my jacket lapel and screamed, "Harry!" I whirled on him. It was Captain Powell. "He's dead, Harry," he said loudly but evenly. "He's dead." And like a gust of wind blowing away the summer heat, it was gone. I blinked my eyes stupidly. My lips were curled back in a snarl. The muscles of my face ached from the frightful mask I'd twisted my features into. They felt like coiled springs being released. Everything on my body drooped. I was suddenly aware that I was panting like a marathon runner. Captain Powell looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite translate. My right hand hurt, actually ached with fatigue. I looked down and saw with some surprise that it held an entrenching tool covered in blood and tissue. I let it drop to the ground from my exhausted fingers. Then I saw the SS officer and the mess I'd made of him. I stared at him for a few seconds, thinking, "Holy shit, did I do that?" "Harry, do you need a medic?" Captain Powell asked with real concern in his voice. All I could do was stand there, numb to the world and blinking rapidly. Shorty Malone came up, armed with one of the SS troopers' weapons, it looked like a large burp gun, and swore when he saw me standing there like the Walking Dead. His wide eyes went from the SS officer to the bloody entrenching tool lying on the ground by my feet. "God damn, Sarge," he said. "I'm glad you're on our side.